On that cold Christmas morning, while most families celebrated with forced hugs and laughter, I held Gabriel's hand, my husband, and let slip the words that had echoed in my mind for weeks. I'm pregnant. The silence that fell over the room was not one of joy or astonishment, but of icy judgment. My mother, Elisa Valente, stared at me as if I had committed the gravest of transgressions. Then, her voice, cold as the winter outside, delivered the sentence, "You are dead to me. Forget any inheritance." For an instant that seemed eternal, I was paralyzed, but an unexpected calm washed over me. I picked up the gift I had prepared with such care, a simple red ribboned package, and placed it on the coffee table. Without another word, I turned my back on that house, knowing I would never return. Elisa had no idea what was inside that box, something that would dismantle the entire facade of perfection she so cherished. My name is Clara. I am 28 years old, and for a long time, I was the daughter my family expected. Impeccable, perfect, born to follow the traditions of a renowned lineage in the big capital. My grandfather had built an empire of car dealerships in the 70s, and my mother, Elisa, lived as if this granted us a title of São Paulo nobility. She frequented the most exclusive clubs, organized charity teas where rich ladies exchanged gossip while poking at their salads, and held inflexible opinions on who was worthy of associating with us. In her view, I should marry a doctor or a lawyer, someone whose resume she could proudly display. But fate led me to Gabriel Rodriguez. We met 3 years ago at Boa Esperança Hospital, where I worked as a nurse. Gabriel was there due to a motorcycle accident. Nothing serious, just scratches that required my care. As I attended to him, he charmed me with light jokes, asked about my day, saw me as a person, not just a uniform. After years of dealing with men who only saw my surname or a trophy for social dinners, Gabriel's genuine attention was a revelation. He was a tattoo artist, wore long hair, rode an old motorcycle, and came from a humble family in the greater city region. For Elisa, he was the personification of ruin for my future. The first family Sunday lunch was the disaster I had expected. My mother spent the entire meal questioning Gabriel about his career and financial plans. My father, who usually stayed out of my relationships, made incisive comments about motorcycle safety and suggested Gabriel consider more stable transportation. Leo, my younger brother, 25, who still lived in my parents' basement and whose only job was playing video games, laughed silently, as if watching a comedy show. Gabriel, however, faced everything with remarkable grace. He answered every invasive question with honesty, spoke about his dream of opening his own tattoo studio, and even complimented my mother's cooking. But I saw the gears of judgment turning in her eyes. This was not the son-in-law she had planned for her portfolio of future investments. As soon as Gabriel left, Elisa cornered me in the kitchen while I was doing the dishes. "Clara, dear, I'm sure he's a good boy, but you need to be realistic. What kind of life can a tattoo artist offer you? What will our club friends think? And your children's college, your retirement security?" I reminded her that I had my own career and was capable of contributing financially. She waved her hand, dismissing my words as if shooing a fly. "Nursing is a dignified profession, dear, but it's not a lifestyle. You need a husband who can truly support you." From that day on, the criticisms became a constant hum. Every phone call somehow returned to Gabriel's flaws. Every family gathering came with subtle digs about my phase and when I would finally find someone suitable. The most ironic of all was my brother Leo, who never held a job for more than 6 months and whose maximum ambition was to level up in his games. Yet, he felt entitled to lecture me about Gabriel's lack of direction. At the time, I didn't know that Elisa paid Leo's rent and car insurance. That revelation would come later and would unmask the blatant hypocrisy behind my mother's moralism. The marriage proposal happened on a random Tuesday while Gabriel and I were preparing dinner in my apartment in Jardim Primavera neighborhood. He was telling me a funny story from the studio when suddenly he fell silent. I looked up from the knife I was using to cut vegetables and saw him kneeling, holding a ring he had designed himself. "Clara," he whispered, "I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" The ring wasn't extravagant or ridiculously expensive, but it was perfect. He had incorporated our birthstones into a unique design, symbolizing the union of our lives. It was thoughtful, personal, and far more meaningful than any generic jewelry store diamond. I said yes immediately, not because I needed to think, but because I had never been so sure of anything in my life. When I called my parents to share the news, their reaction was as if I had announced joining a dangerous cult. My mother remained silent for 10 endless seconds before launching into a rehearsed speech about how I was wasting my potential. She used those exact words, as if my value as a human being was tied to my future husband's income. My father was slightly more diplomatic, suggesting a long engagement to be sure. Even Leo picked up the phone to share his wisdom about marriage being a big step and that I should perhaps date more people before settling down, coming from someone who couldn't keep a girlfriend for more than 3 weeks since high school. But I was happy. Gabriel and I got married 6 months later in a simple ceremony surrounded by his warm and welcoming family and our closest friends. My parents attended, but their faces were mournful throughout the celebration. My mother refused to smile in a single photo. 6 months after the wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. Gabriel and I had planned to wait a year or two before starting a family, but life sometimes has its own plans. We were ecstatic, perhaps a little apprehensive about the timing, but genuinely thrilled to become parents. I decided to tell my parents in person, with the naivety of believing that the arrival of a grandchild would soften their stance toward Gabriel. I foolishly believed that the reality of their first grandchild would be more important than their prejudices about his background and career. I should have known. My mother's reaction was even worse than to the engagement announcement. She didn't congratulate me, didn't ask about the due date, names, or if we needed anything. Instead, she started calculating the impact on the family's reputation. "People will think you had to get married." The fact that we had been married for 6 months seemed irrelevant in her calculations. Then she uttered something I will never forget. "Clara, you know there are other options you should consider. This doesn't have to define your future." She was suggesting an abortion. My own mother was suggesting I terminate my much-desired pregnancy because the father didn't meet her social standards. I ended the conversation right there and left, but the damage was done. The months leading up to Christmas were filled with growing tension. My mother stopped inviting me to family gatherings. Leo sent occasional messages, mocking how parenthood would destroy my freedom. Only my father contacted me occasionally, with brief messages asking how I was, but even those seemed devoid of conviction. As Christmas approached, I made a decision. I would give my mother one last chance to choose love over pride, family over reputation, but I prepared for the high probability that she would fail. So, as I wrapped a beautiful Christmas present for her, I prepared something else. Complete documentation of who Elisa Valenti truly was behind her benevolent facade. I had no idea how soon I would need it. Christmas morning arrived, cold and clear. I was 7 months pregnant, my belly rounded and evident under my winter coat. Gabriel offered to come with me, but I said it was something I needed to do alone. He kissed my forehead and said he loved me no matter what happened. I drove through the familiar streets of the large capital, decorated with lights and garlands, with my carefully wrapped present on the passenger seat. Part of me still hoped for a miracle, that maternal instinct would overcome snobbery, that the sight of her pregnant daughter would trigger something human in her. When I arrived, the house was immaculate, as always. My mother opened the door, impeccably dressed, every strand of hair in place, her expression carefully neutral. My father was in his usual armchair, reading the newspaper. Leo was sprawled on the sofa, scrolling on his phone. "Merry Christmas," I said, sitting in the armchair where I had sat thousands of times. My mother offered coffee, which I refused due to my pregnancy. This seemed to irritate her, this visible reminder of my condition. We exchanged forced pleasantries about the weather and traffic for a few minutes. Then I took a deep breath and uttered the words I had rehearsed. I wanted to tell you personally that you're going to be grandparents. The baby is due at the end of February. We are so happy and hope you'll want to be part of your grandchild's life. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face went through several expressions: shock, revulsion, calculation, before settling into an icy fury. "I don't want you or that bastard in this family," she spat, her voice like cracking ice. "You are dead to me and out of the inheritance. You made your choices, Clara. Now live with them." My father hid behind his newspaper. Leo, unbelievably, chuckled. I sat for exactly 3 seconds, processing what had just happened. Then, with hands that didn't tremble, though my heart was in pieces, I took the Christmas present I had so carefully wrapped from my purse. I placed it on the coffee table in front of my mother. "Merry Christmas, Mom," I said, my voice low. Then I stood up and left. I didn't cry until I got to the car. There, I sobbed so hard I had to pull over 3 blocks later. But beneath the pain, there was also a strange relief. I had given her every chance. She had made her choice, and now I was free. My mother had no idea what that innocent-looking box contained. Inside, a USB drive loaded with documentation I had spent months compiling. Financial records showing irregular withdrawals from family accounts. My own medical records documenting stress-related health issues, anxiety, and blood pressure spikes that began precisely when I started dating Gabriel. Emails and text messages exposing her manipulation and emotional abuse. But the real bomb was the copy of my grandfather's revised will. 6 months before he passed away, my grandfather had altered his estate plan. He had observed my mother's treatment of me with increasing distaste. In the final will, he left me the bulk of his personal fortune, separate from the business holdings my parents directly controlled, explicitly bypassing my mother. She never knew because the lawyer who executed the estate kept that part confidential, as per my grandfather's instructions, to be revealed only if certain conditions were met. One of those conditions was my mother attempting to disinherit me. Along with all the documentation, there was a handwritten letter I wrote on hospital paper during my night shifts, composed in the silent hours as I processed the grief of losing my family. The letter explained everything: how her rejection had affected my health during pregnancy, how I tried to build bridges while she burned them, how I was tired of trying to earn love from someone who conditions approval on my obedience, and how, from that moment on, she would be blocked from my life completely. I drove home to Gabriel, who held me as I cried. Then we made hot chocolate, sat by our small Christmas tree, and talked about the family we were building, a family based on real love instead of social performance. 3 days later, my mother's lawyer called. She had opened the present. Our daughter, Sophia, was born at the end of February, healthy and perfect. Gabriel cut the umbilical cord with tears streaming down his face. His parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins filled the waiting room of Boa Esperanza Hospital with flowers, balloons, and genuine joy. The family I had married into celebrated our daughter as if she were the most precious thing in the world. My biological family sent nothing. I blocked all their numbers and focused on my new life. Gabriel's tattoo studio was thriving. I went back to work part-time and was promoted to head nurse 6 months later. We bought a small house in a neighborhood with good schools. Sophia was surrounded by love from grandparents who truly cared, who looked after her unconditionally, who celebrated every milestone. Meanwhile, my mother repeatedly tried to make contact. She called the hospital and tried to get through to my supervisor, Dr. Anacosta, claiming I was experiencing postpartum mental health issues and needed intervention. Dr. Anacosta shut that down immediately and told me I was one of the most well-adjusted new mothers she had ever seen. Then, when Sophia was 8 months old, my brother Leo showed up at our house, unannounced. He looked terrible, thin, unshaven, wearing clothes he seemed to have slept in. But what shocked me most was his expression upon seeing Sophia, pure awe, followed immediately by what looked like grief. "She's beautiful," he whispered. She looks exactly like you did as a baby. What do you want, Leo? I asked, without inviting him in. Mom and Dad are getting divorced, he said. That stopped me. My parents had been married for 32 years. The story came out slowly. After Christmas, my father couldn't cope with my mother's treatment of me. They started fighting constantly. Then, my father discovered something during the divorce proceedings. My mother was secretly giving money to Leo, 183,000 reais over 2 years. Money she told Dad was for household expenses and charitable donations. 183,000 reais to finance Leo's entire lifestyle, while she lectured me about financial responsibility, while I worked double shifts to pay for nursing college, while she rejected Gabriel for being financially unsuitable. The hypocrisy was shocking. She's stalking you, Leo added softly. She hired a private detective to take pictures of you and Sophia. She has a whole album. It's honestly creepy. I got a restraining order the next day, but Leo surprised me. He got his own apartment, found a stable job, and slowly proved he had genuinely changed. He became the uncle Sophia deserved, consistently showing up, respecting boundaries, never sharing information with our mother. My father reached out once, through a lawyer, asking to meet his granddaughter. I carefully considered it and then declined. Too much damage had been done. A year after that Christmas morning, Gabriel and I renewed our vows on Sophia's first birthday, surrounded by people who truly supported us through everything. As we promised to keep choosing each other every day, I looked at our small but genuine gathering and felt complete. The little girl my mother had rejected now had a family that would never question her worth. Sometimes the best Christmas gift is finding out you don't need the people who never truly valued you. Now tell me, what would you do in Clara's place? Leave your comment. Don't forget to like the video to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss more inspiring stories like this. See you next time.